Our theme for 2022, as we move beyond the difficult past of the last 2 years toward a future in which we believe that God has made available to our race, to His people, is that God reigns. On the day when Israel returned the Ark of the Covenant to the tent that David had set up in worship, or set up for worship in the city of Jerusalem, you can read yourself in 1 Chronicles chapter 16, verse 31. He praised, "Let the heavens be glad and the earth rejoice, and let them say among the nations, the Lord reigns." Again, on another occasion, the sons of Korah praised in Psalm 47 and verse 8, "God reigns over the nations, and God is seated on His holy throne." And then Isaiah will prophesy in Isaiah 52, setting the stage for what we have just celebrated in communion, the dying of the Son of God, the servant who would suffer so that He could make righteous the sinners that we all are. Isaiah will say, chapter 52, verse 7, "How beautiful on the mountains are the feet of the herald, who proclaims peace, who brings news of good things, who proclaims salvation, and says to Zion, your God reigns." We often talk about God being in control. But sometimes that flies in the face of what we experience in our life. When around us it seems like there's chaos, we watch the news, murders, terrorism, political uprisings, poverty, injustice, hate. Yet God reigns. What does that mean in the face of so much chaos, suffering, and outright evil? How can God be in control when so many people are in rebellion? And while we're at it, why does God's sovereignty have anything to do with me? That's going to be the focus of my lessons this month. Look at Psalm chapter 7. Psalm chapter 7 and verse 17. It says, "I will thank the Lord for His righteousness, and I will sing about the name of the Lord, Most High." Or look at Psalm 9 in verse 2. "I will rejoice and boast about you. I will sing about your name, Most High." Psalm 29 in verse 2. Psalm 29 and verse 2. And you probably guessed right, we're going to spend a lot of time in Psalms today. "Ascribe to the Lord the glory due His name. Worship the Lord in the splendor of His holiness." And then Psalm 66. Psalm 66, verses 1 and 2. "Let the whole earth shout joyfully to God. Sing about the glory of His name. Make His praise glory." And begin turning to Psalm 93, where we're going to read in just a second. We're going to focus on 2 Psalms. But what we're trying to sew together here is, how can we make affirmations like the Bible does that our God reigns, the Lord reigns, your God reigns? So many times we have the perception that when those words come out of our mouth, it means that everything in our life is wonderful. That I could say that God reigns because everything's going great on the stock market and everything in my portfolio looks really great. my wife is wonderful, my kids are wonderful, and I'm driving the best looking car in the neighborhood. That's when we think we're supposed to say our God reigns. Because we've grown up in a culture that assumes the idea that what it means that God reigns and what it means that God is king and sovereign of all things, it means that you're going to get what you want. And that's not what that means. In fact, we're going to notice that many of the times that all throughout this month, that the times that those statements keep coming up are in the context when things are not going good. Our God reigns. Because the reason God reigns is because He's Creator. Look in Psalm 93. The Lord reigns. He is robed in majesty. The Lord is robed, enveloped in strength. The world is firmly established. It cannot be shaken. Your throne has been established from the beginning. You are from eternity. The floods have lifted up, Lord. The floods have lifted up their voice. The floods lift up their pounding waves. Greater than the roar of a huge torrent, the mighty breakers of the sea, the Lord on high. He is majestic. Lord, your testimonies are completely reliable. Holiness adorns your house for every day to come. Now look how the psalmist acknowledges the reign of the Lord. Notice how the psalmist understands the significance about this, that the Creator God upon His throne, what is it that makes Him rightfully there? Verse 1, He's robed in majesty, enveloped in strength. That's the English Standard Version that I'm using this year. That the psalmist used in powerful poetic wording for us to visualize this massive force that has created the things that are around us. In fact, in the psalm, he will continue to show that the earth around us is the testament, is the data, it is the proof that God reigns. Full of majesty and full of strength. But He's not just Creator with majesty and with strength. Notice verse 2. Your throne has been established from the beginning because you are from eternity. The very fact that God creates signals that God preexists. And as soon as we start trying to find ways to reword Genesis 1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, we begin the process of removing God from His rightful place as the one who reigns. That God is Creator is the reason that He reigns. And notice he'll go on to say, the floods have lifted up, Lord. The floods have lifted up their voice. The floods lift up their pounding waves. I don't know about you, but when natural phenomena occur and you watch it, whether it's the powerful force of a hurricane, which living in the area that we live in, we get to experience on several occasions. Or if you have ever experienced the force of a tsunami, a wave of water powerful enough to knock everything down in its path and take life at a sudden breath. We're awestruck at nature. Walking into any science presentation at the Grand Canyon or the Houston Museum of Science, scientists upon scientists will show us the grand and amazing and beautiful, but yet powerful force that is nature. Loudly, with presentation after presentation, is the statement made that we must respect nature. God created heavens and earth. And that's why He reigns. If we have reason to bow and to acknowledge and represent the truth that in the finalist analysis, why do we build houses? Because we're smart, people say. Well, okay, sure. But we build houses because we are protecting ourselves from a force that we have no control over. Why do we ride cars? Because we have to get everywhere else fast. While I'm not minimizing those people who've helped us do those things that provide us such comfort. The reason that we do it is because nature is powerful and God created it. God reigns. And notice when he says in the end of verse 1, the world is firmly established, it cannot be shaken. Notice he's going to say in verse 5, Lord, your testimonies are reliable, and holiness adorns your house for all the days to come. There is a permanence to what the Lord has created. Don't hear me wrong. But there is a permanence to what the Lord has made. The psalmist will say in chapter 19, verse 1, the heavens declare the glory of God. In Psalm 19, verse 7, he'll talk about the law of the Lord, the fear of the Lord, that it endures forever. I can't make anything last. Talk to my retaining wall. Talk to my shoes. I don't know any of us that can make things last forever. But I can guarantee you that if you came up to me after my lesson today and said, well, I can, Don, you're going to be proud of it. I bet you are. God made this world, and here it is still. When we expand our horizons to see beyond the created realm, because in our modern world we begin to understand what really is out in the dark spaces beyond our eyesight. The permanence that the Lord has given to His order gives us reason to say God reigns. The psalmist wants us to see that about Him. Time, space, incident, wherever it is, the Lord reigns. Do you remember in Daniel chapter 2, on the occasion where Nebuchadnezzar was given a dream, and Daniel was empowered by God to be able to interpret the dream so that Nebuchadnezzar would understand his small space in the world where he was king. And Daniel will say in chapter 2, verse 20, may the name of God be praised forever and ever, for wisdom and power belong to Him. He changes the times and the seasons. He removes kings and establishes kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. And then when the interpretation comes, Nebuchadnezzar should have understood his small place in the realm of all things. Later in chapter 4, he'll say again, Daniel will, verse 17. This word is by decree of the watchers, and the decision is by command from the holy ones. And this is so that the living will know that the Most High is ruler over human kingdoms. And He gives them to anyone He wants and sets the lowliest of people over them. Daniel said that while his people were enslaved in Babylon. Things weren't wonderful, but Daniel said, you need to understand that God is king over all kingdoms, while his own people were enslaved. David becomes king after decades of poor leadership under Saul. The ark returns to prominence, comes out of hiding. He builds the tent where the ark will be placed. And he says, let the heavens be glad and the earth rejoice. Let them say among the nations, the Lord reigns. Isaiah does the same thing, picturing the Redeemer of Israel, the world He will bring. Because He will be born of the virgin, but yet rejected by men, suffer and die at the hands of ungodly men. He will live a life that no one will ever want to live. But the Lord will reign. So now turn to Psalm 46. Most commentaries place this psalm in the aftermath of when God delivered the nation from the army of Sennacherib. The siege that occurred where the angel took down 185,000 Assyrians in one night to rescue the people. It's said that Martin Luther's hymn, A Mighty Fortress is Our God, is inspired by that event. So look at Psalm 46. God is our refuge and strength, a helper who is always found in times of trouble. Therefore we will not be afraid, though the earth trembles and the mountains topple into the depths of the seas. Though its water roars and foams and the mountains quake with its turmoil. There is a river, its streams delight the city of God, the holy dwelling place of the Most High. And God is within her, and she will not be toppled. And God will help her when the morning dawns. Nations rage, kingdoms topple, the earth melts when He lifts His voice. The Lord of armies is with us. The God of Jacob is our stronghold. Come, see the works of the Lord, who brings devastations on the earth. He makes wars cease throughout the earth. He shatters bows and cuts spears in pieces. He sets wagons ablaze. Stop your fighting and know that I am God. Exalted among the nations, exalted on the earth. The Lord of armies is with us. The God of Jacob is our stronghold. What does the psalmist now tell us about God's reign? Now, certainly at the very beginning, he tells us that God is our refuge and strength, a helper in times of trouble, an affirmation of confidence that we can know that when we are living in harmony with the will of God, God will be our protector. And he says in verse 2, even, don't be afraid. But look at the words that the psalmist used to describe that. That God is my refuge, that I'm not to be afraid. Not when someone says some mean thing to me. I realize that that's possible. God is my refuge and strength when I don't get that promotion. God is my refuge and strength when my kids misbehave. He says, God is my refuge and my strength, and I'm not supposed to be afraid when the earth trembles and the mountains topple into the depths of the sea, though its waters roar and foams and the mountains quake with its turmoil. Yes, you can say, oh, Don, that's just poetic language. Well, why did he use such powerful images? It's to show us that God can reign over every force of nature. Every force. He reigns because He is the creator of life. He is the creator of nature. He is the creator of this world. Every psalm has exuded that truth. And that has not changed after the cross. God has the ultimate control of every force He created. Notice in verses 4 through 7, there is a river, its streams delight, the city of God, the holy dwelling place of the Most High. God is within her. Nations rage, kingdoms topple, but the earth melts when He lifts His voice. The power of what God is. No doubt the psalmist is really thinking first of Jerusalem. That this is where God's people are. This is where God has placed Himself to be among the people. And it was a beautiful city to them. But I cannot read those verses without thinking of you. And I can't read those verses without thinking of heaven. That nations rage, kingdoms topple, the earth melts when He lifts His voice, because the Lord of armies is with us. And I can only say that because God reigns. So when He says in verse 10, stop your fighting, your translation may say, be still. We can only do that when we acknowledge in truth that He reigns. Certainly He's speaking comfort to the harassed. He's speaking comfort to those who've been overrun with frustrations and difficulties. But His statement is more than mere assurance to the people of God. What the psalmist is saying is that God is in control because He created it all. The reason He controls the wind is He created it. The reason He controls the sun is because He created it. I realize the naturalist within us, the scientist within us, is saying, well, this is the way that it works. The sun does this and it cycles all around that and everything. Okay, every one of you, why don't you all try to do that yourself? Why don't you try to make a sun like that to do it yourself? Can you do that? No matter how we acknowledge the processes by which all of these things happen, it was God who reigns, who made it happen. So when the forces of evil have done everything they can to oppose God, to oppose His people, and to oppose you, God reigns. If God can be for us, Paul said, who can be against us? This morning, if you want to become a Christian, you will have to surrender to the sovereignty of God. to the rule that He has, because as we've talked about this morning, He is creator of all creation. He reigns because He made all that there is, and He controls all that there is. But God doesn't control you against your will. He calls you to yield your life in obedience to the Christ who died to make you whole, whose blood offered by Him to offer the atonement for our sins. So this morning, if you want to become a Christian, that offer remains every moment of every day. But we sing this song today because if you're ready to become a Christian, we're ready to help you.